This is Real News Media TV, coverage you can trust. Please like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Select all for daily news updates. Opposition supports the calls for PEP ability test to be pushed back to March. The parliamentary opposition says it supports the calls for the Ministry of Education to allow grade 6 students to sit their primary exit profile ability assessment in March instead of this month. In a statement Wednesday morning, spokesman for Education Dr. Angela Brown-Burke appealed for reasonableness and for the authorities not to ignore the impact of the disruption in teaching and learning over the last 2 years. Dr. Brown-Burke said she shares the concern of teachers and parents who are worried about the students' readiness. She has recommended that the students be given an extension to March when they can sit the ability assessment along with the performance task. Mrs. Brown-Burke says this would provide an extra month of learning and preparation. Man shot and injured in Halfway Tree Square. A man was shot and injured in the busy Halfway Tree Square in St. Andrew on Wednesday afternoon. The incident occurred about 1:45 p.m. and the man was rushed to the Kingston Public Hospital where he is undergoing treatment. As a result of the development, the police cordoned off the Hope Road entrance to the intersection, which resulted in a buildup of traffic. Government considering ways to ease pressure of rising prices on consumers. Minister with responsibility for information Robert Morgan says the government is actively considering ways to ease the pressure of rising prices on consumers. His comments at Wednesday morning's post-cabinet media briefing come just a day before Finance Minister Dr. Nigel Clark tables the 2022-2023 budget. Mr. Morgan said rising commodity prices is one of the biggest concerns of the government at this time, and the discussions are ongoing about what to do to assist the local consumers to deal with what is, to some extent, an unprecedented period in our global markets that is impacting them. If you would have looked over the last couple of weeks, you would have seen the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Agriculture raising concerns about things such as the rise in chicken prices, about the rise in bank fees, and also the impact that floods have had on our farmers, which also may lead to increases in prices at the local market, he pointed out. The government has come under pressure from the parliamentary opposition, which has accused it of being unconscionable by maintaining the gas tax despite the spiraling fuel prices. Quizzed on whether removal of the gas tax is also being considered, Mr. Morgan deferred to the finance minister, noting that he is probably the most competent person to pronounce on government tax policy. There are several revenue measures associated with petroleum, so there is no homogeneous gas tax on petroleum. But as it relates to taxation of commodities, I think that's a conversation that we are going to have with the Ministry of Finance, as the Ministry of Finance is where tax policy is executed, he said. NEPAL grants Aranda permit to mine Cockpit country. The National Environment and Planning Agency has now granted a permit allowing Aranda bauxite to mine in the vicinity of the Cockpit country. Last month, the Natural Resources Conservation Authority announced that it had approved mining in a much smaller area than was applied for by the company. It said mining would only be allowed on 1,324 hectares in St. Anne. Aranda was seeking to mine 8,335 hectares under Special Mining Lease 173, but in May last year, the mining minister said the boundaries would be reviewed following objection from stakeholders. Prime Minister's trip to Bahamas was at minimal cost to taxpayers, says government. The trip by Prime Minister Andrew Holness to the Bahamas for the reopening of Sandals Royal Bahamian Resort is said to have been at a minimal cost to Jamaican taxpayers. The trip took place on January 27. Robert Morgan, minister without portfolio in the office of the Prime Minister on Wednesday, disclosed that an expense of less than $400 was incurred. The trip was funded by the hotel, which is Sandals Resorts International. The only cost that the government bore was, I think, about $380 per denom, he revealed. However, details about the cost of preparations for the upcoming visit to Jamaica by Britain's Prince William and the Duchess of Cambridge, Kate, were not available at Wednesday's post-cabinet media briefing. The couple is slated to visit Jamaica in March as part of a Caribbean tour to mark the Platinum Jubilee of Queen Elizabeth II. Mr. Morgan directed queries about the proposed visit to the Governor General's office, where that matter properly resides. All participants in Sagicor Sigma Run must be vaccinated, said Tufton. All 3,500 persons who will be allowed to participate in the 2022 Sagicor Sigma Corporate Run in March must be vaccinated. That announcement was made Wednesday by the Minister of Health and Wellness, Dr. Christopher Tufton, at the launch of the annual charity event at the Jamaica Pegasus Hotel in Kingston. Tufton had signaled in recent days and had faced a backlash from his comments that there will be a calendar of upcoming events which will exclude those persons who are unvaccinated against COVID-19. Tufton had previously said that with the availability of vaccines, it was time for Jamaicans to frown upon the unvaccinated. Having received applause from the audience in attendance at the Sigma Run launch Wednesday morning, Tufton said, "Thank you very much for that. I thought I would have been stoned." He stressed that the Health and Wellness Ministry sees the staging of the Sigma Run as an important part of the recovery from the pandemic. He said it also signaled that the Sagicor Foundation has also recognized that vaccination is a critical part of the recovery. According to Tufton, the government approached the management of the COVID-19 pandemic in a way that treats all Jamaicans equally. I want that to be very clear in order to clear up any misunderstanding, he stressed. However, he said it is very important for us to recognize that in managing this pandemic, there are degrees of risk that have been assessed and an appropriate approach applied to those degrees of risk. In other words, while we're all equal, some are more vulnerable than others. Some situations are more vulnerable than others, the minister stated. Tufton argued that it was in these situations that in the management of the pandemic or the risk, we have to pivot, we have to adjust even while we build to get back to recovery, to normality. That's what the team at the ministry has been doing. Tufton argued further, some may interpret that as being unfair, but the truth is, there are times when some of the restrictions that we impose, we regret to impose any restrictions, that is the ministry, by extension the government. The minister said, there are times I know when some people feel it is unfair to them, and it is true that it is difficult to always apply differentiation across the board on an individual basis. It's impossible. No country has done that. He admitted that at times some policy positions benefits some persons more than others. He pointed to the decision of the government to create the resilient corridor that allowed the tourists to visit Jamaica and the tourism workers to return to work at the height of the pandemic. We got a lot of pushback and quarreling from segments of the society when we declared a resilient corridor, which was intended to support a very important industry, which was an attempt at balancing lives and livelihoods, Tufton noted. He also noted that some persons felt that it was unfair treatment in favor of one segment of the society over another. Despite recent criticism, the Health and Wellness Minister said at this point in the pandemic, the government has to recognize those who have taken the time to take the job. He is insisting that those who are unvaccinated pose a greater risk, not just to themselves but to the health response, because they are by far the most likely to end up in the hospital, to take up the beds, to require the ventilators, to take the time of the doctors and the nurses, and oftentimes at the expense of others who need that ventilator, who need that bed or operating theater. Andre Redock remanded again. Andre Redock, who is accused of killing Tanika Gardner at Pathways International Kingdom Restoration Ministries in Montego Bay, St. James last October, was remanded on Thursday morning when he appeared in the Home Circuit Court. When the matter was called up, Mr. Redock's attorney Anthony Williams told the court that he received the psychiatric report on his client on Wednesday. Mr. Williams said he needed additional time to peruse the document. Mr. Redock is to return to court on March 4. Tanika Gardner and a man identified as Michael Brown were found dead on the compound of Pathways International Ministries on October 17. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Select all for daily news updates.